Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the XForceGlobal channel. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. Today, we're back with another Bitcoin analysis, and I'm here to make sure to update the price action from our prior analysis and videos to see how we can go forward with the updated wave counts. Now, let's organize our scenarios. I'll do my best to break it down, but first, let's split our analysis into two sections: what is likely and what isn't likely. This approach should significantly narrow down the possibilities, saving us from endless debate. What that means is, a few weeks ago, I discussed the possibility or the potential for a WXY double combo idea. Now, as per our last live stream and video, this idea is incredibly rare and should be dismissed. I recommend others to do the same, as these patterns usually evolve into something entirely different, and that is where the drawback happens for the Elliott wave theory, and is actually some kind of call out that I have been making for quite some time, and I've been very sound about this. Now, there's no need to be creative here anymore because the market psychology applied, we are on the edge for both the bulls and bears, essentially a Mexican standoff between the two. Now, you have to choose one side or the other in simple terms. So if we're going to start discussing what is likely and what isn't likely, let's talk about what isn't likely. Now, I've mentioned on my social media, again, a few weeks back, for a while, that this idea was becoming unattendable because we've exhausted two of the last possible scenarios for wave Y, a zigzag and a possible triangle. Now, we had the first beginning of this 5-wave impulse into a wave C. Incredibly nice. We did this move to the upside more or less perfectly for this wave X. But this move here, like I've said, we've exhausted two of the last possible scenarios for the wave Y, which is the zigzag or the triangle. Now we're left with the wave Y potentially being a flat, but to achieve this, we need a series of nested 1-2 structures for this wave Y. Now this is something that I'm not seeing from a lot of other people, but this is the only way I would count it, where we have a nested structure going into a possible wave 3, 4, 5 of a possible nested 1-2 extension of a wave 3. Now, to achieve this, like I've said, we need a series of nested 1-2s, but this is highly improbable. Not impossible, but highly improbable. I would rate this scenario at a 5% chance at this time of recording, and I strongly advise against using this idea because I believe we're heading towards a much more bearish scenario if this were to happen. Now, I'll share my alternative scenarios in my members-only group for now, but this idea, like I said, I've done my best to organize this. This is statistically the lowest of any type of correction after an exhausted wave Y, after the zigzag and triangle has completed, especially if the first wave is flat. Now, we can't have a flat. That's going to give us achievable possible sideways equilibrium in terms of Fibonacci levels. But again, this idea is becoming incredibly unlikely. Now, why? Because this flat here, our B wave, went above the origin of wave X. I'd rather label this as the top of something else. This is why we want to label this as a possible impulse, and that's why we have to utilize this range as an impulse instead of seeing this as a possible corrective move. Now, we can utilize this flat into a different 1-2 scenario, which I'm going to be talking about, but for this wave X being labeled here just doesn't make sense to me. So, like I've said, this idea being a double combo, I have never seen this. I've backtested this 100% 5 or 6 times in a row. And if so, it is counted differently. I have just yet to see a double combo for Bitcoin. Why? Because market psychology wise, we have seen distribution patterns play out in bursts. So this is why Bitcoin, I believe, is going to be resolving itself either extremely bullish to the upside or extremely bearish to the downside. You are either on one side or the other. And that is the way you should be focusing on in terms of your analysis as an Elliottian and also as just a technical analyst. We are coiling up for something, which is going to be either really strong to the downside, retesting these 50K levels, or we're going up to retest the all-time highs and surpassing that. So that's my scenario of why we should be leaving this idea out of the picture. So hopefully whoever's watching this, I hope this idea is going to be removed from your ideas as well, because I just don't see this happening on the larger time frames. It just doesn't fit in the macro, and I've never seen this type of corrective pattern in the past. So what does that mean? To me, I believe we're still bullish. So that's why we're going to be focusing on the narrative. Now, the questions we have to ask ourselves in terms of how we're going to be bullish is, are we in a larger corrective move? And I've just answered that question, which is, I don't believe so. Are we finished with the wave 3-4 of the largest degree? Yes. So if we're going to choose that route, we have to work with that narrative, which means, are we finished with the wave 1-2, or are we looking for a larger wave 1-2? And that's going to be determined by the time versus depth of this 1-2. Now, this wave 1 could be labeled alternatively in between an inner exchange with this top and this top here. Why? Because that's just the way it is. We can either have this as a flat if we're seeing this as a range as a technical analyst, or are we looking for a deeper correction, which is going to be in terms of depth versus time now. Now, if we see this as a completed wave 3-4, which I've been talking about for quite some time, this move up here into a wave 1, again, albeit not the best looking 5-wave impulse, it's possible. Why? Because we're assuming that this is a sideways structure, so we have to make that internal sacrifice that this is a 5-wave move up. That's far better than saying that WXY combo is in play. Now, the reason why is because all of this range here, even if that WXY scenario were to play out, guaranteed we're going to have someone or everyone jump on the bandwagon saying that this is a 1-2 if we start moving to the upside. So if you're bullish no matter what, you should start looking into what possible of a 1-2 correction scenario could be playing. So we have the first idea of this being a flat. Now we have the possible first leg as an A, B, and then C. Now the only way I can count this as a possible C wave is seeing this as some kind of ending expanding diagonal that is now complete for this wave C, if this level is going to be secured. Now, how is that going to be secured? We are very close to the invalidation level regardless. So this, at this time of recording, this could be changed. If we break lower, then I'm going to start turning bearish. We're going to have to start turning into different scenarios. So this ABC flat idea is now the first idea and the idea that could be exhausted if this level breaks. So if this level breaks here, this flat idea to me is going to be out of the picture. Now, how do we achieve this level here? This part is so tricky that I think that the only way I can count this is a possible move as a 3-wave move into a WXY that's now working, or if we're utilizing this whole move as some kind of range in between and we're going back and forth, that mode of correction is going to be only applicable via a possible diagonal. And diagonals are characteristics of strong distributions of the inner waves, meaning that you're seeing strong overlaps between each other. Now, wave 4 didn't go surpassing that wave 2, so this is deemed valid. Wave 5 is longer than wave 3, and wave 3, again, doesn't have to be, but still longer than wave 1, still achieving a possible expanding diagonal look. Now, again, wave 3 doesn't have to have any wave relationship to wave 1 according to the new rules and guidelines, so that's something to keep in mind from an educational perspective. But again, this important move here is more important than anything else, because if we zoom in, I think this is where many of the people have a hard time or trouble, is that this move here is an A, B, C, and then we have a W, X, and Y, and this could be an ABC, and that is the only way we can achieve that possible last move here into a larger move of a possible expanding diagonal. So that to me looks like a completed ABC move that we're now ready to move up to the upside. Again, this could be invalidated. I'm not saying here on which is the most probable scenarios. I'm trying to figure out what scenario we can narrow down as much as we can, because right now we have 3 ideas in terms of a 1-2, and that's the only way that I'm going to be counting it, because I'm on the bullish side. There's no reason for me to swap bearish at this point until I know for a fact that we're going to be breaking these levels and I find red flags. So it's better to stick with how are we going to be building a 1-2 idea. So this 1-2 idea is the flat idea that we're going to be working for more upside. That's the first idea that we're going to be working with level by level. So what's next? We are now working in a possible 1-2 in terms of depth. So we have the 1-2 completion. Now, how can we extend the 1-2? We have 2 options here. Okay, one option is in terms of depth that we have short in time, which is the only way we can count this move here now is an ABC. This move up here, wave X, albeit very, very weird looking wave X. Again, I mentioned this previously that this is unlikely, but since this move came down, this idea is now starting to come back into play, which means this wave X is in play, and we're working for another 3-wave move into a wave Y to complete wave 2 as a sharp wave 2. Now, this idea is pretty... I guess it could happen if we continue moving to the downside impulsively for a wave A. I just haven't found out if this wave A is complete or not. So if we break this level, most likely if we correct up and break it, then we're working for a wave C of a wave Y. Now, I like this idea if we do it in a relatively short time, because we do have the possible channeling technique applied here. So we would definitely want to be working within a channel here. And that is the only way I can fit into possible WXY for a sharp wave 1-2. So that's a possibility. Why? Because the first move is a textbook ABC. Now, the third idea is applying the idea of having both time and depth, which means that this move is now complete. And again, with that hybrid scenario of that move up to the upside before we move down, depending on how long we correct for this wave B, I believe that this can also be a wave B, and then we'd be working for another 5-wave move to the downside, and that would be the ABC rather. So it just depends on how you're seeing this as a wave X, or you would like to see this as an idealized zigzag. And to me, I think this idealized zigzag fits a little bit better than a WXY. So this here is now a completed range. We're working for another range here, and then we're working for the final range here. So 3 steps here, right? And that is the only way I can fit in both the time and depth that we would also revisit the 618 levels or the golden zone or the 6786 zone or the 886 even, because I know that wave 2s are characteristics of very deep wave 2s within the crypto markets. So this is applicable. I believe that the 618 is going to have the highest probability of a price reaction, but I don't know if that's going to turn into something even a more complex corrective structure that will bring us down to the 886 or even the 786. So to me, I believe that this idea is the most idealized scenario where we see some kind of ABC being built here, and then we move up for that wave 3. So those are the only 3 scenarios that I can see possibly playing out. Now, again, to summarize this, like I've said, to me, I like this idea in the fact that if we're going to remain bullish right now as we speak, this is now finished, completed sideways movement. Why? Because we've discussed this before being a possible sideways movement. So we have to continue with that narrative. So that's the only way I can fit in a possible C wave. Now the 1-2 depth is a possible ABC into wave X. And again, just to kind of revisit, wave X has hit the 70% basically on target. So this is a valid WXY double zigzag scenario. Then we have the possible third scenario as the same utilization of that expanding diagonal, but just as a leading expanding diagonal going into wave A. And then we have a possible B wave now being created, and we'll see how these Fibonacci zones within this void here get remet. If we break above, go with the scenario number 1. If we get rejected and we see the first signs of an impulse to the downside, that's going to be possibly part of the wave C, and then we revisit that 618. So that's the only way I can see these 3 different types of scenarios, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, utilization of these different zones, distribution zones, are very key within this market. To me, this is a completed move, and then we have a 5-way move up into a wave 1 or a 5-way move up into a wave 1 here. That's the only 2 ways that we can see this wave 1 being built. And then from there, to narrow it down more, is just time and depth. How do you want to see this wave 1-2 playing out? What mode of corrections can you see a 1-2? That is the only way you should be doing it. Otherwise, you're sticking to an ultimate bullish scenario. There's no in-betweens at this point, in my opinion, where we're seeing a possible WXY scenario. Now, we can sit here and just say it's valid, right? Absolutely. But to me, if we're seeing this top being here, I just don't think that this is a WXY anymore. Why? Because originally what I have anticipated, I would have liked to see this move here when we were trading at this period of time. We could have seen this being built as the 5th wave move, meaning this could have been the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of that wave X, and then we could have seen some kind of move here to help create that equilibrium, and then create some kind of divergence for wave 3 and between wave 3 and 5 for the momentum indicators. Then we could have talked about if this was a zigzag, a triangle, or even a flat idea being created for a possible wave Y. But this idea to me is just out of the picture. And I know that there's a few people trying to say that this is even a WABC going into wave Y, or sorry, wave C, saying that this was the A, this was the B, and this was the C. It's not likely. So hopefully that was educational. Hopefully the help was helpful. As you can see, I've only talked about the possibilities of a possible 1-2 scenario here to help reduce a lot of the inefficiencies in the markets and see how we can utilize the next range that we're going to be determining as a possible 1-2. If not, we're looking for much deeper levels for a correction, in my opinion. And I'll be talking about those scenarios if we do revisit these levels. But for the time being, let's stick with the possible 1-2 ideas and just see what kind of mode of corrections we could be creating with those. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video.